Hi everyone. Well, thank you for logging on to this first lesson in my 8-week mindful meditation course where we're going to focus on breathing. I found myself a bit of shade on a really very hot English summer's day in rural Herefordshire. It must be nudging 30 degrees. If you can hear some panting in the background, that's my dog Annie rather than me. I think it's quite appropriate though. I consider taking her back down to the house. But actually there's something quite appropriate about a breathing dog in a breathing meditation session. So hopefully it's not too distracting. Okay, so we're going to look at breathing today. We're going to do some breathing practice. We're also going to do a bit of theory and some quite personal stuff from me about why it is that I do this stuff and why it is that I'm bothering to take your time to share this stuff with you. Because I do think it works, and I wouldn't be trying to shove something down your throat if I didn't think it worked. Before we do anything though, let's do some breathing. And I'm going to invite you to do 10 breaths, 10 good, deep, but comfortable breaths, okay? And the first thing to think about when you're breathing is trying to get into a decent posture with, if you can, a straight back, trying to open up that airway so it's nice and easy. And then if you breathe in and out, in and out, in Okay, so that's my 10 breaths done. Now, finish off your breaths if you've not got to 10 yet. Just carry on breathing. And by the way, even when you do get to 10, don't stop breathing. Carry on breathing. See if you can go through this session listening to me. See if you can just continue with a good, reasonably deep pattern of breathing. Try and use this as an extended breathing practice. What can we say from that first practice? Well, when I was doing the whole breathe in, breathe out thing, I found it very difficult because, suddenly I'm trying to guide people breathing and I'm trying to breathe myself and talk, and it doesn't work. And so that was actually quite stressful is too strong a word, but that provoked a bit of tension in my chest. But as soon as I stopped and I focused on the breathing, actually for me very quickly, things started to slow down, and my mind started to slow down, my body, my thorax, because a lot of my tension, a lot of my anxiety, is in and around the thorax for obvious reasons, around your heart. And actually by the end of the 10th breath, even though I'm sort of, leading a meditation, breathing exercise session, I felt pretty good actually. And if you didn't, and this links into a really important first point about the whole idea around mindfulness, if you didn't find it restful, calming, slowing, then that's absolutely fine. And a key definition, a key starting point with mindfulness anything, is the idea that actually you accept what's happening in your body and what's happening in your mind. What you're trying to do, if nothing else, is you are trying to notice what's going on. But having noticed, you're not really trying to change anything. So if you're breathing and actually there's a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety in your chest, then that is the reality. There is a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety in your chest. That's it. That's your truth right now, and that's absolutely fine. Likewise, if you're trying to breathe and your mind is going all over the place, well, that is perfectly valid too. Now, in relation to mindfulness, one of the great things about the idea of the breath as a constant, as this thing that is always happening, it's always there, is that it becomes a focal point. And particularly if your mind wanders, and mind wandering again is a key theme in life, but also in mindfulness meditation. If your mind starts to wander, the trick is to notice that that's happening. And then, having noticed it's happening, doing something about it. And the doing something about it is coming back to the breath. And that's all that you're doing. When I say do something about it, all you're doing is you're coming back to the breath. Come back to your breathing. Yeah. And if we can start to accept that what we feel is absolutely fine and what we think is absolutely fine, and we don't judge it, we accept it, we're kind to ourselves, to our thoughts, to our bodily sensations, that's a really healthy place to start. And that links in to a possible starting definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness now has become an academic subject. There's lots of books and academic articles written about it, lots of competing but mainly complementary definitions around mindfulness. But one analogy that I read in a wonderful book on meditation called Breath by Breath by a mindfulness teacher called Larry Rosenberg is that he likens mindfulness and mindfulness meditation to a mirror. And why that's significant is that a mirror just reflects back what you're seeing. If you're treating a mirror normally, you're just saying, what am I seeing? And that is the same with mindfulness. What am I seeing? What am I feeling in my body? What am I seeing? What am I feeling in my mind? That's it. Yeah. So when you're with your breathing, when you're doing a meditation practice, just think about the fundamental purpose of these exercises as being just a mirror. Yeah. Reflecting back what it is that you're thinking and feeling. So don't force it. Don't feel the need to force. Don't feel the need to be feeling something that you're not feeling. Just be with what it is. That's absolutely fine. We'll do some more breathing in a minute. But before I do that, I just thought I would pause on this question of why is it that we're doing this thing. I would say that probably the majority of you watching this are attracted to the idea of meditation, breathing as a way of dealing with life stress, anxiety, angst. Some of you may have clinical anxiety. I had clinical anxiety, but that's gone, thankfully. And the way that I use my breathing now is to manage my day-to-day life anxiety and stress levels. And it does that, undoubtedly, and I really am a passionate advocate of it for that purpose. But it's more than that. And there are a couple of quotes, again, in that book that I referred to earlier, Breath by Breath, which really struck me when I was flicking the pages again before this particular session. And I just thought I would quickly read these two quotes. And the first one, apologies, the first one goes like this. We in the West have a very strong in order to mind. We want to go from A to B, B to C. Ideally, we'd like to go from A straight through to Z, get our PhD on the first day, skip all of the steps in between. Enlightenment in one easy lesson. Our mind spends all its time calculating. Everything is a means to an end. Now that description of the way that we think, the way that our minds work, for me was really powerful when I read that, because it described me to a T, particularly pre-nervous breakdown. That was me. Always thinking, always calculating, I'm doing this because it's going to get me that. Now, to a degree, I'm okay with that, because we need some of that. It's part of the human condition. I don't think we can get rid of that even if we wanted to. But when it's harnessed and in balance, it helps us to achieve great things. I wouldn't be doing this now if there wasn't some of that, in me. So I want to keep hold of it. But everything's about balance. And what I found personally is that when it gets out of balance, it can lead to an awful lot of anxiety, a lot of angst, worry, stress. But it's more than that, and there's a quote that crops up a few pages later in that Rosenberg book, which I think in a sense is even more profound and more insightful than the first. He says, most of us respect some things and not others. We pay attention to an important business meeting, but not to our children when they're talking to us. We watch the latest Hollywood blockbuster, but we don't listen to the birds in the trees. Every time I read this, it hits me smack between the eyes. The idea that actually, if we're being brutally honest, if we hold up a mirror again to ourselves, often we respect and prioritize work, other things, other people, over and above our own children, our own husbands, wives, partners, family. We say that we don't. We say that family is the most important thing, but we behave inconsistently with it because we prioritize the work. And okay, you've got to work, you've got to hold down a job to pay the mortgage, absolutely. But this comes down to, well, why are we doing this breathing stuff? Why do we bother? Because actually, for me, speaking personally, what I'm finding is that my breathing is one of the things that helps me to pull away from the worst excesses of this, kind of mode of mind that gets you prioritizing the wrong things, thinking too much about the wrong things, thinking about the stuff that you have to do, the work stuff, whereas actually what you want to do is to look your children in the eye and be absolutely 100% with them in that moment. Yeah. And I passionately want to be that kind of father for my children. And if I'm being brutally honest with myself, I think before my breakdown, I was falling woefully short of that. And post breakdown, I'm not sure I'm always getting it right, but actually with the help of my breathing, almost like a guardian angel, helping me pull away from ingrained patterns of thought, overthinking, rumination, constant focus on business and work, these ingrained patterns of behaviour, this excessive doing, the working too long, the working too hard, the excessive intensity that sometimes goes along with that. Breathing is a key part, a key tool of pulling away from that, pulling away from the worst excesses of that, and recentering, finding some equilibrium. And I'm finding it incredibly powerful. I really am, and I commend it to you if you haven't sort of worked with it and experimented with it already. Okay, so let's do some more breathing. Okay, we're going to do another a set of 10 breaths, and I'm not going to introduce it. I'm just going to say straight back if you can, open that airway if you can, and we're going to do 10 good deep breaths, starting in, out. Okay, so that's my 10 breaths done. Again, if you haven't quite got there yet, just finish off your set. And again, just carry on breathing, don't stop breathing. Treat this whole thing as an opportunity for you just to breathe in a way perhaps that you don't normally do. Okay. So what can I say about that set? probably easier, more relaxing for me than it was the first time round. I was thinking a bit less. I knew that I'd introduced the idea of you guys breathing 10 times, so there was less for me to think about. I found that my thorax sort of relaxed more quickly this time. And my mind, my head was in a pretty safe place. It was focused on the breathing. Now, a really simple tip, by the way, because a lot of people come to meditation type stuff, I know I did, and said, look, I just can't do this because my brain is all over the place. I just can't sit still and breathe and meditate for, half an hour. I mean, I still struggle, by the way. It's still a challenge for me to sit down for half an hour, but we'll come back to that later on in the course. But counting is incredibly powerful, incredibly simple, but so powerful, certainly for me. So when I say to you, breathe 10 times, I literally mean that in your head, you're counting 1, 2. And the reason for that is very simple, which is that it gives your brain something else to focus on. It gives you a shot at focusing on your breathing and on the counting than on, the next thing on your to-do list. And that links into the broader idea around practice, because even though all that we're doing is breathing, I think maybe what you're already seeing is that there is this thing around practicing breathing, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. And there are tips and there are tricks, breathing whilst counting, sitting up straight so that you've got a nice straight posture, trying to think about what's happening in your body and your mind. All these things are new things. These require a bit of practice. So practice, practice, practice is the order of the day, and that links into a bit of homework that I'm going to invite you to do at the end of this session. Okay, so that's probably enough theory, enough talking. Let's now focus on a breathing practice. Now, this breathing practice is incredibly simple. It's focused around these 10 breaths that we've done now a couple of times in this session. But it does a bit of what I call top and tailing. It bolts on a few things, top and bottom. And I thought I would describe it to you so that you kind of understand where it's coming from, and also so that you recognize how it works and what it looks like. It's got 5 elements. By the way, it's 90 seconds long. So again, when you're thinking about, well, how do I fit meditation into my day? Well, the way that you do it, certainly to start with, is to do a bit of breathing. Because this exercise will take all of 90 seconds from start to finish. We're talking fractions of a percentage of your waking hours. This is very low impact stuff in terms of time commitment. So the 5 components are what I describe as an alerting breath to begin, 3 arrival breaths, then into the 10 breaths themselves. That is, if you like, the core of the practice. 3 exit breaths, and then a 5th element, which is technically after the practice is finished, but where I invite you to open your eyes. And by the way, that's another tip. When you're breathing, closing your eyes just sometimes helps to remove the distractions from the world around you and just help you to focus on the breathing. So I would invite you to sit with your eyes open, just absorbing, reflecting, connecting, maintaining in contact with what you've been doing. Perhaps continue to breathe maybe 3, 4, 5 times before you then make a decision to crack on with the rest of your day. The reason for that is that we're all very kind of action focused. And what I was finding with me when I was doing breathing exercises and meditation generally, actually, is that as soon as that meditation finished, that breathing exercise finished, bang, I'd be right back into that doing mind, that doing zone. And what I find from personal experience is that just sitting at the end, after the end of the practice, just breathing a little bit more, just helps me to remember that there is a way of being productive, there is a way of being busy and effective, which doesn't necessarily involve doing this, you know. So I find it a very helpful discipline. Going right back to the beginning, you know, what is this alerting breath? So the alerting breath is the thing, if you like, that introduces it. It alerts your mind that you want to take a time out. That's kind of what it is. So you take a very deep breath in before breathing out. And I breathe so deeply, I take that breath so far into my chest, or so down into my lungs, I should say, that it actually produces that sense of panic, that adrenal rush, a bit like when you've been under the swimming pool in the water for too long and you're just beginning to stop being able to breathe. And you may think, why on earth is he saying that we should do that? Well, I'm not necessarily saying that you should do that, because you may find it really unpleasant. In a strange kind of way, I find it very reassuring, because it gets the attention of my brain. You know, that adrenaline hit really sort of says to my brain, oh, okay, this really is a time out. Okay, I'm going to break from what I'm doing. And it then, if you like, it kind of brings my mind, my body, and my breath into the same place. And that then means that when I go into what I describe as the 3 arrival breaths, and these arrival breaths, the reason I describe it as arrival is that I'm arriving into my practice. Yeah, so I'm going from real world into practice world. That's the arrival element. And by the way, if you're wondering why I do it this way, in most meditation practice, certainly that I've been taught since starting my master's course, there is a really sweet, quaint use of Buddhist bells. So ding, 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 to start each practice. And actually it's wonderful, it's lovely. And if you're listening to a meditation on your headphones, you know, it can be quite nice. But I need to be able to do this practice anywhere, everywhere, at any time. And I'm not, with all the will in the world, going to carry Buddhist bells around. So the 3 arrival breaths are the equivalent of hearing those 3 bells. It's you saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to go into a place now where I'm going to focus on my breathing. And then those 10 deep breaths. I say that this whole thing only lasts for 90 seconds. That's right. But of course, the wonderful modular nature of this exercise is that if you want to push on and do 20 breaths, then all that you're doing is adding another minute, onto the practice. If you want to sit and do 30 breaths, then actually what you've got is a 3-minute breathing exercise, top and tailed with about 30 seconds of extra stuff. But I suggest that you start with 10 breaths and build up from there, if you haven't done this stuff already. The 3 exit breaths, again, that is transition. Again, the breaths are saying, okay, I'm finishing my practice and I'm heading back into the real world, which then comes back to the idea that actually before you launch yourself into the real world, there is this final 5th element, this invitation to sit with your breathing. Look around, just absorb everything, open your eyes, literally. Also try and retain that sense of what was happening in your body and in your mind. Just stay with it. Just for 3 breaths more, 4 breaths more, 5 breaths more, before you then get on with the day. Okay, so I'm going to take you through this now. Don't worry so much about whether it's working from a technical perspective, whether you're keeping up, whether you're finding it relaxing, whether it's working for you, because I'm trying to teach this thing to you so that you can watch this and then do it yourself multiple times between now and next week. Okay, so we find ourselves somewhere that we can sit or stand, straight back, comfortable posture, and we take a deep alerting breath in. Which then enables us to take our 3 arrival breaths in, So those 3 arrival breaths then segue into the 10 breaths themselves, in, out. Now that's my 10 breaths done. If you haven't quite got there yet, just carry on breathing, complete your 10 breath cycle. Before going into those 3 exit breaths, the transition from practice to real world. So in, that's the 3 exit breaths. And then that leads me into opening my eyes. Technically we've finished that practice, but I'm just going to open my eyes, invite myself, invite you, just to look around what's happening in your world. My panting dog to my left, the nettles in front of me, the acer tree that I'm looking at. Just breathing some more, trying to breathe some more before thinking about going back to the real world. And speaking of real world, the real world is not the real world without some homework. Well, certainly in my line of work with university and education. So homework, I hope very simple, very achievable, I hope really accessible. I'm conscious that some of you may be meditators, so if this sounds too simplistic, then by all means carry on doing your own thing. But I'm preaching to a mixed audience here. And some of you may not do a single conscious bit of meditation, breathing type work at all. So this is where it starts. It starts with 3 sets of 10 breaths. If you do nothing else 3 times a day between now and the next session, that would be fantastic. And all remember that you have to do is to do it. And if you forget, you forget. The great thing about these 10 breaths is that if you forget, you've probably got time to do it, because we're talking about a minute. If you do it and it doesn't feel good, that's fine. That is really valid. Don't try and change it. Don't beat yourself up. Oh my God, I can't even breathe. Just focus on the breathing. Focus on what's going on in your body, in your chest, in your mind. If your mind wanders, remember that's absolutely normal. That's absolutely fine. Bring it back to the breath. That's all we're asking you to do. That idea of mindfulness is just a mirror, a thing that is just telling you what's happening. You're not trying to change it. You're not trying to force it. You're not trying to bend it to your will. You're just allowing it to be. Just see where the practice takes you. If you want to kind of do a little bit more, then try and do these breathing practices. Yeah, so the alerting breath, the 3 arrival breaths, we're formalizing now. It's becoming a mindful meditation now, because we're introducing some elements of intention, attention, awareness, attitude. Yeah, we're making it more of a thing if we introduce that topping and tailing. But even then, remember, it's 90 seconds, if you stick to the 10 breaths. So perhaps if you feel that you can transition to that, maybe do that 3 times a day. See how you get on between now and next week. Okay? And next week, what we'll be doing when we start the session is we're going to be doing a breathing exercise to start the session. It will be silent. I will be trusting that you've done some practice, and that when I say we're going to do an exercise, you can just do it. But the focus of next week's session is going to be on the 3-minute breathing space, or the 3-minute breathing step. And it's a foundational but short meditation in mindfulness. Yeah. And hopefully it's a logical next stepping stone. Yeah, because as the name suggests, it's intended to last about 3 minutes. Okay. So let's see how we get on this week, and I really look forward to working with you next week.